You like to think you'd refuse. If someone in a position of power told you to hurt another person, you'd say no. You'd walk out. You'd be the one who stood up. Almost everyone believes this about themselves. And almost everyone is wrong. A Yale psychologist named Stanley Milgram set out to answer a haunting question left over from the Second World War. How did ordinary people follow orders to commit atrocities? Were they monsters? Or were they simply human, in the wrong conditions? He built an experiment to find out. Volunteers were told they were participating in a study on memory and learning. They were assigned the role of teacher. Behind a wall sat a learner, actually an actor, never in real danger. The teacher's job: read word pairs, and deliver an electric shock every time the learner gave a wrong answer. Each wrong answer raised the voltage. The shocks weren't real. The teachers didn't know that. As the voltage climbed, the learner began to react. A grunt, a complaint, pounding on the wall, begging for it to stop. Then silence. Whenever a teacher hesitated, a calm man in a lab coat said one of 4 phrases. Please continue. The experiment requires you to continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. No threats, no weapons, just a calm voice and a coat. Before the study, Milgram asked psychiatrists to predict how many participants would go all the way to the maximum shock level. They guessed 1 in 1,000. Outliers. Sadists. They were wrong by a staggering margin. Roughly 2 out of every 3 participants went all the way to the end. Not because they were cruel. Many were visibly shaking, sweating, begging the experimenter to stop, and then continuing anyway. What's actually happening in the brain during a moment like that? Psychologists call it the agentic state. It's a shift where you stop seeing yourself as the author of your own actions and start feeling like an instrument, carrying out someone else's will. The responsibility doesn't disappear. It transfers, in your mind, to the person giving the order. This isn't unique to Milgram's participants. That switch exists in your brain too. So picture this. You're new at a job. Your manager asks you to do something that feels slightly wrong. Bend a number. Stay quiet about something you noticed. Your stomach tightens. And then you do it anyway. Because the responsibility already feels like theirs, not yours. You told yourself you were just following instructions. That sentence is doing more work than you realize. Here's the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. Milgram found that distance changed everything. When the experimenter gave instructions over the phone instead of standing in the room, obedience dropped sharply. When the teacher had to physically hold the learner's hand onto the shock plate, obedience dropped even further. Closeness to the consequence made it harder to continue. Distance made it easier. This explains more of the modern world than almost any other finding in psychology. The executive who never sees the layoff letter land on someone's desk. The person online who would never say something cruel face to face, but types it freely behind a screen name. Distance doesn't just reduce empathy. It quietly dissolves the sense that you're even the one responsible. Now here's the counterintuitive part. You'd assume the people most likely to refuse were the boldest, the most rebellious. Milgram's data says otherwise. The people most likely to stop were the Ones who, at some point, asked one simple question out loud. Who is responsible if something happens to him? That sentence broke the spell. Saying it aloud forced the responsibility back into their own hands, where it had been the entire time. That question is the closest thing psychology has to a real antidote. Not bravery, not a stronger personality, just one spoken sentence that refuses to let responsibility slide quietly away to someone else. You can find smaller versions of this pattern everywhere in your own life. The meeting where everyone nods at a plan they privately think is wrong, because the person leading it sounded certain. The group chat where a joke crosses a line and you say nothing, because someone else set the tone first. The instruction from above that you follow without asking why, because asking feels riskier than complying. None of this requires a lab coat or a shock machine. It only requires a structure where someone appears to hold the authority, and that quiet, almost relieving feeling that the outcome is no longer yours to own. You like to think you'd refuse. Milgram's data asks you to sit with the honest answer, you don't actually know, not until the moment arrives. What you can know, right now, is the one sentence that changes everything. Who is actually responsible here? Ask it early, ask it out loud. It might be the only thing standing between you and a version of yourself you never planned to become.